All set? All set. Excellent. Well, let's get underway then. Very good. Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Webster. I'm an enterprise agile transformation coach, trainer, speaker, author, chief cook, and bottle washer. And if you can come up with a better job description for me, I'd be incredibly grateful. What we're here for today, hands up if you are brand spanking new to agile thinking, if today's like day one. We've got a sprint. Excellent, jolly good. How about if you've been around agile for up to about a year? Good, over a year? Over 5? 10? I had a feeling, since back before it was cool. Yeah, very good. Well, if you've been around it for any length of time, you've probably met people who are like, that doesn't work, we tried that. And it's very likely that that's true, that they did. And if you're brand new, I expect you'd like to know what all the fuss is about. Well, that's what we're going to go over real quick today. Because what I've found, I've coached hundreds of teams. And consistently what I've found is that where I step into a team that's just been taught to do something by the book, they don't get it. But where we get a chance to go through some of this stuff, it takes them to a place where they can go, oh. So that's the noise I want to hear from you guys at some point, all right? How we're going to do it, I'm going to go through a deck. Now, I warn you, this is usually something that takes me an hour if I handle questions, 90 minutes if we do an exercise. Today we've got 45. Okay, so we're really going to have to get a move on. So I want to make sure that you got that. Please put out your cigarettes, seatbelt on. Are you ready to go? Good. Okay. So, question for you. How much do you know? Let me narrow it down. Let's say, how much do you know about work or about a specific project that you're working on? Well, let's say, if this circle represents everything you could possibly know about it, how much do you actually know at the beginning? Well, maybe I exaggerate slightly for the sake of effect. Let's say it's that slice. And this is what you know that you know. And you know that you know it because you can actually take action. You can plan for something, right? I know that I know how to speak English, for example, right? It's easy to take action. I just speak, right? Then we've got another little slice here. This is what you know that you don't know. So, for example, I know I don't know how to speak Mandarin. Haven't got a clue, right? But I know that. So what's all of this? It's what you don't know that you don't know. Exactly. Now, do you think there are going to be surprises in here? Do you think there might be more work than you expected hiding in there? Because here's the thing. We're essentially talking about writing software, right? If you'd written it before and so knew everything about it, you'd use that. Right? So by its very nature, what we're doing, which is a creative thing, is going to have content that you didn't know that you didn't know. Oh, this is how come when I think it was Hewlett-Packard, don't quote me, did a survey of 400 projects. What they found was that they had a curve that kind of looked like this. The little bit over here were a few things that came in early. And that's because of this little sliver. What you don't know that you do know. Right? That stuff where you go, oh wait, we have done this before. Or, oh my goodness, this is easier than we thought. But it's a tiny, tiny piece. They found there was a little sliver of stuff that came in roughly on budget. Right? Where it just so happened that the mix of what they knew that they knew and they didn't know what they didn't know worked out right. But the vast majority, woo! From, 10% longer to 100 times longer was what they found. Everything runs over. This is why. So what we're trying to do is to move it around. Yep, that's kind of the point of Agile. Agile thinking is about going, I have no idea what I'm doing, how am I going to figure it out? In fact, one of the things I love to say to people is, In this game, the moment you think that you know what you're doing, you're probably in trouble. Damn it. Which is tough because all of us are very highly educated and very highly trained. Who here has got a degree? Right, exactly. Who here has a certification? All right, there you go. It's tough, right? I get it. So let's pop this over on one side. This session's a little bit like that story about the Committee of Blind Men. One's going, I think it's a rope. Another's going, it's a pillar. Another's going, it's a wall. Another's going, no, it's a branch. It's an elephant, right? I'm going to show you the Agile elephant. And I thought about calling it that, but would you come and see an Agile elephant presentation? Probably not. So here's a point I really want you to get. So actually, let me just recap. That first point, I want you to write down DK, DK. Don't know what you don't know. All right? Now this one, there's a bit less to look at. What I've got here is a graph of roughly the last 10,000 years of human population. Hands up anybody that's not human. Good. There's sometimes one or two. There's always one. Thank you. Very good. Excellent. Well, you're welcome as well. That's very glad you're here. That's very good. Now, something I want you to get is that actually really this line goes back to not 10,000 years, but maybe somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 years of Homo sapiens, this version of human, right? And it took us about 200,000 years to get to, where am I looking? Around about here. Somewhere in here, around 1800, we'd reached 1 billion people on the planet. And to get there, we'd spent most of our time being hunter-gatherers. And as hunter-gatherers, we'd made it as humans because we got good at just 2 or 3 things. We got good at taking patterns that we'd learnt from the past, that we'd survived and found useful, and using them to predict the future or react to it, right? Worked really well. But look at that curve. That's not just a good curve for population, that's a good surrogate for a curve of the pace of change. We got good at identifying patterns from the past to use in the future inside seasonal or even generational change. Anybody here got a Twitter account? Anybody got a Facebook feed? Right. Change is not seasonal anymore. So there are a couple of other things that we were good at. We were social. Because the thing is, we're weak, squishy, and delicious, right? And we have a very long childhood. Unless we're very good at being social, the wolves will get us, right? So we are actually designed to be social. And the last thing that we had, it's a good trick this, imagine there's something that you come across where you didn't have a pattern from the past to know how to handle it. So what would be a wise way to be around that? Scared. Fear has actually been this remarkable mechanism for having us go, "Ooh, run away," right? Or maybe I'm going to have to fight this. Or maybe I'll just freeze and hope that the bear doesn't see me, right? Those 3 things have kept us alive. And the thing to bear in mind, has anybody here brought a bear with them? Good. But has anybody here ever been scared because their manager has been yelling at them and you're really clear that it's your fault that the whole thing's going wheels up? Right, well, social threat nowadays is pretty much the equivalent of the bear. And that's because a very deep portion of your brain that was practicing this for all of this time goes, I need to be social. I'm weak, squishy, and delicious. If somebody is yelling at me, they might just kick me out of the tribe and the bear will get me. That's why you're so scared when somebody gets in your face and starts yelling at you. It is literally a fear of death. You may not be thinking that, but somewhere deep down in your neurology, it's going, oh my God, I'm in such trouble. We don't like that, right? So remember this, that curve represents an enormous amount of paleoanthropology and evolution, and I could spend hours, and I have, just talking about this curve. So there's another little bit of the elephant. Right, now let's just step to one side. So this one time, I came into work really early, right? And I got onto the elevator, and this guy got on behind me, and he was wearing a suit. And I'm noticing there's nobody here wearing a suit, you get it. In our world, suits are kind of scary, right? So I pushed the button to go upstairs, and the elevator started, and it got stuck. Ah! So I figured we'd be there for a bit, so I introduced myself. I went, "Hi, my name's Andrew, I'm the Agile coach." And this guy goes, "Oh, really? I'm the Chief Financial Officer." Agile, huh? Between you and me, I actually think that's all a bit of a waste of time. Well, it just so happened I got a PowerPoint presentation with me. I was in luck, right? And this is what I showed him. So consider a project. Up this side, tested working features, right? That way, time. See, tested working features actually are a fair surrogate, we'll go into this in more detail, for business value, right? Any organization wants to create an amount of business value by a point in time, and that's what it would look like. They have a goal, this much by then. So if we take a traditional approach, you do a whole bunch of analysis, no tested working features. You do a whole bunch of design, still no tested working features. You do a bunch of build, no tested working features. And now you test and fix and test and fix. Oh, crap, we're late. And you didn't find out until there, when it's too late to do anything about it. Why are we late? Because we didn't know what we didn't know, right? So anyhow, what we've figured out is that there's a way to manage that. We take an iterative and incremental approach when we're thinking like agilists. And it looks a bit like this. We do a little bit of analyze, design, build, test, and a bit more analyze, design, build, test. And that lets us extrapolate out. Because if we're going to do the same work, it's probably going to take about the same amount of time. But it allows us to see back there what's going on. We can make a choice. Do we want to settle for a smaller feature set? Would that work? Do we want to maybe change the date? Would that work? Do we have to do both? Well, if we do, we're going to need to employ another team to shift that slope. Top tip, managers, please don't add people to existing teams. It will slow them down. It just increases the complexity of communication, which is one of the biggest sources of waste there is. Tip, right? It's a bonus. It's not up there, it's a bonus. Add another team. Don't mess with existing teams. So, taking this iterative and incremental approach actually gives us a little bit more freedom to figure out how we can be successful. Who likes being successful? Good, kind of figured. Now, this guy, though, is the Chief Financial Officer. And this is what he's actually more interested in. If we go with the old way, look how the money works. You spend money, you spend money, you spend money, you spend money, you spend money. There's a pattern there, isn't there? Right? And for the sake of just giving us some math to do, let's say you spent 4 million, and you've created all that risk. Because until you get to somewhere down there, you've got no idea if you're doing the right thing or not. Right? If you're not producing tested, working features, for all you know, you're going to release it and nobody's going to care. Right? You could have wasted $4 million and blown your reputation. Whoops. But let's say it does work out. You release at some point in time, you've made $5 million you're ahead. Good for you. Well done. Now, if we're taking an agile approach, what we do is we go, let's just do a little bit of work and then release the highest value soonest. And I'll explain more about what I mean by value. Because that early, it might just be learning whether this is something worth doing or not. And you could save yourself getting on for $4 million, right? And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you do it until you reach a point where you go, you know what? Now we've got something that we can put into the market and not be ashamed of ourselves. Now we have a minimum viable product. And because at every step we were testing, and not just testing to see if it works, testing with real people who would benefit from this, we're pretty certain about this, right? And look how much risk we created there. Okay, you got that? You see, because what we're doing is always shifting the highest value soonest, that starts to taper off and flatten off. So why wouldn't we just go, all right, I'll come back to that. It flattens off, right? Let me show you the math. In this version, 5 million, spent 4. So you're $1 million ahead, which over the cost of it, 4 million, is 25% return on investment. Very good. And you'll often hear people going, I want to make sure that we get a high return on investment. The trouble is that the return comes later than the investment, and I don't have a crystal ball. Do any of you? Right. So how quickly can we narrow that down? And if you look at this one, where we left out a whole bunch of stuff that we'd realized wasn't worth doing, we'd spent less, we'd made less, but look, 75% return on investment. Right? I'm just making up these numbers to illustrate it. Well, if you do that once, why don't you stop and do it again? Stop and do it again. That direction or that direction? Pick one. Well, when this really happened, I was just drawing this out on a piece of paper and I gave it to the CFO, and the elevator started back up again. He took the piece of paper and things were never the same again, because this is why businesses care about agile software development. Right? I could spend days talking about all of the social side of it, all of the psychological safety, all of that fascinating stuff, but when businesses are being hard-nosed about whether they're going to stay in existence or not, this is what they're interested in. You got it? Cool. Good. Tuck that one on one side. So how do we do this? How do we get that bang for the buck? Well, let me show you. Very roughly, the same idea. Value, but this way, instead of time, I'm saying effort, right? So typically, if you're not valuing something, if you're not estimating the value, you tend to try and do the biggest thing first, right? Because it makes sense to think that maybe the biggest has the highest risk. And you might actually follow a curve of value creation that looks a little bit like that. Does that make sense? Well, what if they actually all did have different values? What do you know? So if I was now to reprioritize these by highest value soonest, well, I'd do it something like this. Gosh, that's a different shape, isn't it? Look at that. That's the curve of value creation that way, really slow and then steep at the end. Here it's oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? In fact, let's look a little closer. This one, to get almost all the way to the value, well, you got done pretty quick. To get to the same place that way, you needed to very nearly finish. Oh. How many of you guys are product owners? How many of you work with product owners? Right. That's their job. In a nutshell, that's their job. There's a bit more to it than that. It takes a long time to actually really get to be a really good product owner. But that's their job. Got it? This is how you get highest bang for the buck. Typically, we hear people talking about execute, productivity. Who cares? Who cares if you're being productive if you've got no idea if the thing that you're being productive with is any use to anybody? In fact, we don't have time. We've only got 45 minutes. But I could tell you so many stories where productivity has killed a project. It's a thought, isn't it? Okay, next one. Now, you all speak Welsh, yeah? Good Lord. Okay. Well, you're going to have one word of Welsh from today onwards. It's this funny little word here, and it's pronounced Cynefin. Say with me, 1, 2, 3, Cynefin. Cynefin. It becomes a bit of a running gag in the Agile world. How do you pronounce this word? Cynefin, all right? Now, what is it? It's a sense-making framework. Wouldn't that be useful if you could look at something and go, oh, I've got an idea about how I could go about making sense of this. And it looks kind of like this. You've got these 4 major areas. Down here, things are obvious. Up there, complicated, complex, chaotic. Let me explain what I mean, because these are very precise terms inside Cynefin. Obvious is the world of cause produces effect. This is where our known knowns live, right? Oh, I could give you an example. Hang on. Let me show you something. I didn't think to get this out before. Where are we? Now, if I was to show you this, what is it? It's a pen, right? What do you do with it? Yeah, there you go. That was obvious, wasn't it? And so, said another way, all you have to do is sense something in this realm, and you know how to categorize it, and you know how to respond to it. This is where best practice actually makes sense, right? You can consistently use the same approach every time. Put your key in the car, turn it, it goes. Now, up here, complicated is where it's a little bit trickier. You put your key in the car, you turn it, and it goes, meh. Meh. God damn it. This is where you're going to have to apply a little bit of analysis. This is the realm of the expert, right? Here, you can't rely on best practice. That might mean the battery's going, I don't know. It might mean the alternator's dead. It might mean, you know, the hamsters are sick. I don't know. It needs an expert, right? Now, complex is where there is no apparent relation from cause to effect that you can understand until afterwards. This is back in your realm of the unknown unknowns, the things that you don't know that you don't know. Little fluffy cloud, what's it going to look like in 10 minutes? No idea. Video it, big fluffy cloud. Oh, it went that way, cool. You could run the video backwards and understand how it got there, right? But this is where you actually have to poke around with something, to probe into it, before you can actually sense what's going on and figure out a way to respond. Figure out. This is where it's all about emergent practice. Where do you think agile thinking focuses? Now down here is chaotic. This is where it's a mess, right? Basically what you're looking at is going, oh my God, the house is on fire, let's jump out the window. Not something I'd usually do. It's a novel practice, jumping out the window, right? And here's the thing to get. When C-level go, I need a quote, I want an estimate of how much, by when, they probably think that they can rely on everything being here. Engineers, hands up, engineers? You love being up there. Give me a problem, I'll figure it out, right? But you get enough of those things together. I used to work here at PayPal, and there was a lot of acquisition, which means that you're taking a lot of very complicated systems and trying to jam them together, often with not very good documentation, because a lot of the knowledge transfers disappeared in the acquisition. Guess where that goes? Over here. Complex, right? Really hard to figure out. Anybody done one of those big bang integrations and it all fell down? Yes, right. Ow. Right? Good. So let me just expand on this. Let's tip this onto its back. Obvious, complicated, complex, chaotic. Known, knowable, unknown, and unknowable. Isn't that interesting? What's in the chaotic is literally unknowable. These two, obvious and complicated, are ordered, right? That when you've actually figured out what the cause is, you probably get the effect. They are ordered in time and space. These fellows, not. They're unordered. You can't reliably go because this, then that, right? Now let me just show you one other thing here. That's the secret little space in the middle, disordered. Where do you think most companies are most of the time? They're in that disordered space. Basically because, well, how many of you understood this before you walked in this room? Until you've actually distinguished that you've got these different spaces, these different domains, you're in a world of disorder, an absence of awareness of order, null, right? Not zero or empty string, null. So you might want to, if you find yourself in the chaotic, gain control. You might want to, if you're in the realm of complexity, understand things. You might want to, if you're in the realm of complicated, standardize, but you've got to be so careful of standardization because there's a trap in standardizing. You can lose control through complacency and cause catastrophe. Anybody remember Kodak? Kodak invented digital cameras, but to them it was obvious that film was always going to be the way to go. Oops. Got it? This is possibly the most useful tool I'm showing you. Cynefin is such a powerful tool. I will make available a PDF of this, and you can have this particular slide as a reference, and I recommend you do some Googling as well. All right, let's keep moving, let's keep moving. So what's next? Let's have a look. Tech debt. We all know what technical debt is, don't we? Pile of stuff that you haven't got around to going back and fixing. Well, that's not actually the definition. It's called technical debt, not technical stuff to do. Technical debt is the additional cost of adding new features. Can we just build this thing that we think is going to be, I don't know, a couple of $1 million might make us 5? Ooh, yeah, but we've got to spend 10 million re-platforming so it'll work. That's technical debt. It'll kill a company stone dead. You may have seen this classic slide before. Working features over time. If you're very well organized and you know your stuff and you can actually consistently get work done that you know you don't need to come back to, you might be able to produce work in a pretty much straight line, right? A robust sense of done. I work with a lot of startups and I have helped a lot of startups recover from this. They're like, never mind, we've got to get in the market, just produce it, get it out there. Ooh, get lots of cool code, look at that, awesome, we're winning. And then somebody goes, great, I'd like to place an order for $1 million, please. Oops. And they've just realized that because they've created all of this technical debt, this huge gap, they can't get stuff done. Anybody here ever work at YouTube? They had an inner tube project that they took 6 months doing, no new features released. Well, they basically re-platformed the guts of YouTube so that they could keep scaling. I worked at Nest for a time. They had the wisdom to do the same thing. What do they call theirs? Code Yellow. They took 3 months to rebuild some stuff under the hood. LinkedIn very nearly went under. They pulled in a guy from Facebook who helped them completely rebuild their guts. A couple of months later, they got bought by somebody called Microsoft. But there are so many companies who have hit this flat bit where they basically go, I'm sorry, we can't do any more work. We're out of business. It would cost so much to do any new work, we're never going to make that money back again. Bankrupt. So how do you avoid that one? Let's jump into the next one. So, who here works on a team that has a definition of done? Anybody work on a team with a definition of ready? Good. 500 brownie points to you, sir. Very good. So, let me just show you something. This is what I'm talking about. A definition of ready is a checklist of stuff that you must, should, could, or maybe won't consider before a team can go, yeah, you know what, we can commit to that. We're confident we could do that, right? A definition of done is a similar checklist of stuff that the team must, should, could, or won't do to be certain they're never going to have to touch that pesky thing ever again. It's done. It's not 90% done. It's done, right? Now, I've got a buddy who wrote a white paper where what he found, broadly speaking, you take a team that's doing okay, and then you give them a definition of done. They now reduce their rework by 50%. Wow. Add in a definition of ready, it goes down to 25%, right? So in other words, they're now doing 4 times as well as they were beforehand. Oh my goodness. Well, why that is, I actually haven't got a slide for this, but you'll have to imagine it. Any of you familiar with the idea of value stream mapping? From go to woe, from when you start until when it's done, throughout that process, if you map out when you're adding value, as opposed to when you're not, or even when you're maybe removing it, that's a value stream map. In efficient manufacturing, the ratio of value add to the whole thing is typically somewhere in the realm of 20 to 30%. In the realm of technology, what kind of percentage do you think it might be? Pick a number. Did you hear that? 5%. For the very best. Typically, it's 2.5 to 3%. Oh my God. All of that flailing around that we're doing out there, we're only producing value for maybe 3% of it. Well, that sounds appalling, but here's the good news. That means that 97% of it is waste. What if we made that 96%? And we went from 3% to 4%. Ooh, that's nice. So much of what Agile is about isn't about trying to be more productive. It's actually about trying to do less of the nonsense that's not helping. So how would we do that? That's the interesting question. And so using a definition of ready and a definition of done looks something like this. Here's a user story, right? Bit nebulous, but does it meet the definition of ready? Yes, it does. So we'll do some work on it. And we do some work and we're adding value. Sweet, now we've got a potentially deliverable product increment. And does it meet the definition of done? Yes, it does. Squee, we'll give it to our happy customer. Isn't that a great slide? By the way, all of this is native PowerPoint, right? I have absolutely had a riot mastering PowerPoint animation. I'm so proud of this one, it's my favorite one. So there you go, that's what it looks like. That's what a definition of done can do for you. Just those two things, definition of done, definition of ready, may reduce your rework by 75%. That might be enough to squeeze that 1% of waste out, right? So how'd you do that? Well, it's kind of obvious. Here's our potentially deliverable product increment. It's got some buddies that all contribute to something bigger, that contributes to something bigger that's made of other things, right? Work breakdown structure, yeah? Pretty obvious. Well, the thing is that you don't just want to do that by going, let's break it down into its components. We actually want to think about how can we break it down by value. So some of the guys I've worked with at Agile Learning Labs, you can download this from their website, have these 4 basic ways of doing it. Gojko Adzik, who's one of the gods of product development, he's got a hamburger method. It's not just his, but he's the guy that drew this. Then Agile for All, for example, have this lovely flow chart, and then people often talk about a thin vertical slice. There's many ways. Honestly, I can do a workshop with you guys. You could do this workshop as well, quite happily, couldn't you? Honestly, there are no user stories that I've ever met where people go, oh, you don't understand, this is so big, it's going to take 3 months. Yeah, no, we can break it down. Absolutely guarantee you that we can break it down. Okay? So let's tuck that away as well. Now, we need to refine this a little bit. Now, I'm shamelessly stealing these slides. Have any of you heard of Jeff Patton? Well, you have now, right? And you want to look this guy up. So if you're just going to build something just incrementally, it might look a bit like this. Here we have our artist, and he's thinking, I want to produce a beautiful painting that looks just like this. And so his patron has him get started, and that's the first bit. Can he deliver that? Only if his patron's really weird, right? But no, he can't. Nor that, nor that, nor that. Hey, he could deliver that. Very good. Well, he learnt a trick or two there. So next time he's asked to do the same thing, he realizes that actually, maybe what he should do is be just a little bit vaguer. Woman in pastoral setting. So let's try this. Hey, patron, what do you think? Hey, that's nice, but what's she doing with her fingers? That's weird. All right, how about this? Yeah, that's better. Can we have it a bit more colorful? Yeah, good. I was expecting something more somber. I didn't tell you that, but now I'm looking at it. Like this? Yeah, good. Bit of detail, maybe? Perfect. Which of those could he have delivered? Any of them, right? It's just possible that his patron back here went, brilliant, $100 million to you. There you go, pal. Probably not, but you get it? One company is trying to build a competitor to Tesla, right? Another company is going, let's just start with roller skates. They make some money from roller skates, then they move on to skateboards. Then they move on to scooters, then lawnmowers, then golf buggies. These guys have got a chassis and some wheels, and they're still figuring out how to do the battery, right? So we'll tuck that on one side, iterative and incremental. So, how do we actually get to this? What is the bang in bang for the buck? Let me show you something. So everybody wants to create customer value that typically looks like profit to us. Customer value is usually expressed to us as money. Remember customers? Right? I love to say to people when I'm doing a really quick, like 5-minute introduction to Agile, it's like hands up who's an engineer, hands up who's in marketing, law. Right? People put their hands up. I go, good, that's your job. What are you paid for? And they go, delivery? No. Creating customer value. That's the only place the money comes from. Doesn't come from the bank, they want it back. Doesn't come from investors, they want it back, right? They want to make some money on their money. The actual money comes from customers. Well, how do we do that? You can increase customer value, or you could make some savings, right? Savings could be, oh gosh, I don't know, dealing with risk and compliance, using better engineering practices. It could be a reorg. Anybody been through a reorg recently? How could you increase value? Well, you might do some R&D, you might do some marketing, you might increase brand loyalty. R&D could look like smart ideas that come up from your engineers. It could look like innovating on an existing product, making it go better. It could be fundamental R&D, blue sky stuff. It could be anything, right? These are just some examples. But here's the thing I want you to get. Oh, I forgot this one. Anybody work for a publicly listed company? Oh, that's nice. Good. What a relief, because trust me, when you are in a company that's publicly listed, you're being led around by the nose by Wall Street. If you say that next year you're going to have an uplift of 4% and you get to 3.92, they will tell you that you failed and nobody gets their bonus. Right? And believe you me, this is why CEOs tend to turn over pretty quickly. You have no idea the stress most of them are under paying attention to Wall Street. But let me make this point. If we put all of these things over on one side and measure them over time, you'll see that they have different amounts of relevance over time. Something that's valuable at the beginning may be totally irrelevant at the end. But if you actually do the work to identify what all of these business values are and how you can use them as predictive metrics, because remember, money is a trailing metric. It shows up at the end. Now you've got all of the knobs and dials that you can use to actually manage your work, to know whether you're working on the highest value thing soonest, right? I do a 1-hour workshop. It takes a bit of preparation by a product and program manager, but a 1-hour workshop with all stakeholders. At the end of it, they typically go, oh my God, we just figured out what we couldn't do last year for the whole year. Figuring out what value means to them so that then they can make sure that they don't do any work that doesn't contribute to one or more of those values, right? Let's put that on one side. So how do we map this out? Well, this is a little bit more from that same fellow, Jeff Patton. Gosh, he's done some good stuff. So typically, when you write a bit of code, you're actually transforming something over time. We're calling them here major user activities. I click on the login button, the login screen turns up and I fill it in, I click OK, right? Input transformed to output, yeah? That's kind of why we write functions, yeah? And you could write them and understand the flow by looking for something like and then as you're writing about it. You could even refine this into a bit more detail and maybe some options, looking for conjunctions like by and. So I log in by clicking on the button and entering my username and entering my password. And then I click OK. you see what I mean? Now, what you could do is actually consider whether you need all of those up front. You could think about the necessity. So you could actually start to spread stuff out. And here you might be looking for or. Right? Once you've got all of that, you can actually think about spreading it out over time. So for the first cut, you've got a sketch, and then you color it in, a bit more color, and finally some detail. This might be a set of sprints. It might be a set of releases, right? Let's say you actually need to use 3 teams to do this, because this is a big, complicated thing. And there's so many domains of expertise, you need 3 teams. Well, here we have them. We've got pink, green, and blue. That's good. And they can all work on step A, step B, and step C, contributing to each other's work. Well, now you've got everything that you actually need for a release plan. All you do is turn it on its side. And then at the end of every sprint, you update the plan based on the reality that you've just revealed by completing that first sprint. This is how you actually start to manage. Do you remember dear old DK, what we don't know that we don't know? Because the point of doing a story map is that you're reasonably certain about the first line. Then it's starting to get into guesswork further down. And as you work your way through, you refine it and you update the map. As you progress through the plan, you refine it. But the point is that if you're stuck with a fixed date and fixed scope and fixed resources, you've just discovered the big secret that nobody tells you about. When you're talking about that iron triangle, heard of the iron triangle? Fixed date, fixed scope, fixed resources, and typically people say quality slips. Here's the secret. There's no such thing as fixed scope in our world. And this is how you actually manage it. Okay, we've got to get a move on. We're very nearly at time. So let me just show you very quickly how we would actually think about this at scale. This is a thing called the planning onion. Up the top, we would have an organization's whole vision. That defines its purpose, the direction that it goes. Executives typically set that. That's broken out into a portfolio of products, which might be, the initial design might start to involve management. They would then involve the teams to plan out a breakdown of the big chunks of work that would contribute to that. The team themselves, with their product owner, would break that down into stories that they could commit to for an iteration. Then every day, they replan. If you're doing a stand-up and it looks like a status meeting, stop it. A stand-up is a replanning meeting that's based around the idea, are we going to do what we said we would do in this iteration? If we are, good. If we're not, we have to replan. Right? Does that make sense? And so this flows the whole time. It's a little bit like this. Every day, every iteration, every quarter, there's your whole portfolio, there's the whole vision. And if you just like to look at the screen and leave your wallets beside you and make a gentle way out, then it's never worked. Oh well. So anyhow, you get the idea. You've got this misty future. You've got your little boat in the team that's going along on the little waves. You've got a bigger boat. These are lousy, these slides. I hate this one. And there's the big boat. And look, and you're going along, and that's the rhythm. I was trying to get them to bob up and down. I couldn't do it. But you get the point. You get the point. Let's tuck this away on one side. All of your planning is rolling wave planning at different levels of detail depending on where you are in that whole planning onion. Got it? Well, guess how you pull it all together? Scrum. How many of you guys are using Scrum, are certified in Scrum, are familiar with Scrum? Good. You'll be familiar with this. You've got your backlog, fuzzy at the top, you refine it down into more detail. That's the product owner doing that. So that then in sprint planning, the team can pick a chunk of it that they can commit to as a sprint backlog. They then start to work on it during a sprint, typically 2 weeks, might not be, and they refine everything until they get to a potentially shippable product increment. They replan every day. Their Scrum Master is keeping them on track with this whole framework that's placed over their work to reveal what's not working and drive out waste and amplify what is. He uses ways of being visible. The team, use ways of being visible. Burn downs, task boards, burn ups, cumulative flow diagrams. Things that actually make the work visible, because our inventory is not in boxes stacked around us. It's hidden. And that's one of the reasons we create so much waste, is we can't see the inventory, right? It's tucked away in a server somewhere on GitHub. At the end of the sprint, the team show people in a review where they demo their stuff, the people, the stakeholders, people interested in getting benefit from this, give them some feedback. It's also a chance for the stakeholders to get feedback from the team so that they know what they can do and what they can't do, right? Retrospective, the team goes, what can we do better next time? All in service of our little green friend, the potentially shippable product increment. That's your Scrum training done. You can pick up your certificate on a sticky note as you leave. All right? Scrum. So now, I usually stop for questions here. Sorry, we don't have time. But I'm going to make the whole point to you. How many of you know what the first line of the Agile Manifesto is? Anybody? I'll help you out. It's we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. We. This is something that's not about just one individual. This is something done collectively. Remember we're weak, squishy, and delicious? We're really designed around operating as a social unit. We're actually really good at it. Even if you're an introvert, it's in there, I promise you. We are. This is something done all the time in the present. It's not, I have, therefore you should. It's no, we are. We are doing this all the time. That's hard. Our brains don't like doing something all the time. They like to rely on a pattern from the past, right? Uncovering. It's not I have determined. It is we are uncovering. How do you uncover? You pay attention. You pay attention to the work itself. How can you pay attention to it? You make it visible, right? Sorry, I'm not angry. I'm just passionate about this stuff, all right? We are uncovering better. What do we mean by better? And notice it doesn't say best. There is no best in our world. Better. Well, how would we know it's better? Remember all of those dimensions of value? Wouldn't it be interesting to figure those out so that we can measure those and be able to go, no, we are doing better? Ways. What are the ways? I don't know. We're going to have to uncover them. There may be some that other people have uncovered already that we could experiment with. This whole thing is about experimentation. What do we think the problem is? For who? How would we fix it? It's all experimentation, right? Of developing software. Well, I want to remind you something. This is not called the manifesto. It's called the Agile Manifesto. And there are plenty of people who've been looking at it with agile thinking and realizing that you could actually go, of working, of producing great outcomes, of living, of whatever you want, right? But we'll go with working. We're uncovering better ways of working by doing it. This is practitioner-driven. This is not consultant-driven, and helping others do it. Because there's a couple of great secrets in the world. You can have whatever you want for yourself, whatever, if you find enough other people and help them get it. And you'll do that a lot quicker if you do it with other people. We are uncovering better ways of working by doing it and helping others do it. Are we done? Yep, we're done. Yay! Let's celebrate. Round of applause. Thank you very much. Now go back to work. Thank you, guys. My name is Andrew Webster. I'm available for weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, and at your workplace. Come and talk to me afterwards. It's gone a couple of minutes over. Let's clean this room up and make space for the next people. Thank you so much, guys.